everybody. My name is Victoria Thompson. I am one of your hosts for Focus on EDU here at CDW Education. I am super excited to be coming at you from my home office in Orlando, Florida, and even more excited to be having the fantastic, wonderful Dr. Amy Jackson here with me today, where we're going to talk about everything equity, leadership, EdTech, and everything in between. So, Dr. Jackson, welcome to our show.
Thank you. I am so excited. This is the best way to start a Wednesday.
Yes. I love it. So why don't we go ahead and kick it off? Tell the audience just a little bit about who you are, what you do, and what you're passionate about.
So I am an educator. I have been in education since 2008. I'm a career switcher. And so I have tried really hard to make sure that I fully understand the pedagogy side of it, because a lot of times people have that idea that career switchers, don't understand the very foundations of it. I am a mother of 5 and a grandmother of 1. She is brand new. She's out there in the world just trying to figure it out. I am about all things equity. And not equity in the way that a lot of people throw the word around, but really more about how are we making sure that we're making space for everybody in a natural, authentic way, and not something that's forced upon us. When I first started teaching, I taught L students in Fort Worth ISD, and it was always about honoring who they were and bringing them into academic language and academic knowledge. It wasn't about trying to change who they were or change their core, but just add to it. So I've kind of taken that in everything I've done now. I want to help people grow. I don't want to change people. And that's, I went to the best college on earth to get my doctorate, the Virginia State University. Go HBCU. I'm so excited.
That is awesome. So when we were talking earlier, you were referencing representation and educational leadership, and EdTech leadership in particular. So I'd like to hear a little bit more about that and how that plays into your role.
So when I moved from Texas to Virginia, I started working in a small school district that is primarily Black. And I wanted to know all things EdTech in Virginia. I wanted to be knowledgeable. And so I joined VISTE, which is the Virginia Society for Technology and Education, because I wanted peers and colleagues that I could interact with and learn from. And I met Dr. Karen Richardson, who was the executive director at the time. And it was right around the time of the Grammys where it was Grammy So White. I don't know if you remember that hashtag.
I remember that. Yeah. So for those of you who are listening, that was when almost there was very little diversity of who won awards that year. And it was kind of shocking as a viewer. I almost said participant, but I wasn't there. It was kind of shocking as a viewer to see. I'm like, wow, there weren't even a lot of women. No. There weren't a lot of people of color. It was one of those situations where I was looking and I'm thinking of the demographics, and I'm like, there are more people that do things than the demographic that is being showed.
Yes. And so there was a conference in Richmond at the time around educational technology, and all of the pictures that came out on Twitter were very white. And so she sent out a call to action, and she said she wanted to start the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Task Force. And I was like, absolutely. So me and my counterpart, Dr. Nikki Dowd, she and I started this program where we basically wanted to provide mentorship opportunities to people who wanted to be in leadership, not just EdTech leadership, because my philosophy is that if you can understand digital pedagogy, you have a stronger foundation on pedagogy than anything else, because you're understanding how it all kind of connects together. It's got to be a whole piece. And so we did mentorship where we had mentors from all over the state come in and work with these minority individuals. We really focused heavily on getting more Black women into EdTech, because in Virginia, there are not very many. And I mean, that's across the country. And then making sure that We had other minorities as well. We wanted those who represented LGBTQIA+. We wanted people who were other abled. We wanted just a wide variety, because a lot of times when you walk into these spaces, it is white male centered. And so we wanted to change that look. And from there, it just kind of blossomed into, I was like, oh, this is what I'm passionate about. Like, I love EdTech and I love instruction, but being a Black woman who has gone through leadership very quickly, it was like, oh, wait a minute, I'm the only one here and nobody is really listening. Like, everybody, like, we want to, when people say we've always done it this way, they're not saying this is the best way, they're saying this is the white way. Because a lot of things that we do in education are built for middle class white students. We are not thinking about our students who don't fit in that mold. And when we do, we classify them either in students with disabilities, or we classify them in tier 2 or tier 3. And it's like, we have so many students who don't fit into that mold, who fit into the middle of the road, that we're still not paying attention to, because they don't fit where education has been formed.
So I feel like when I work alongside, especially like in my volunteer work here in my town, a lot of people are just a little confused, or maybe they don't know where to start. They want a blueprint, right? Like, how do you begin getting groups who have traditionally been marginalized into spaces of leadership? So can you walk us through what that looked like? Like, it doesn't have to be like a full inception, but just kind of, how do you get people involved? How do you get people on board? And I know a lot of school leaders right now are also wrestling with this, where they want more Black teachers, or they want more educators of color. And, you know, they want their students of color to be seen, and they want their, you know, students who might be differently abled or LGBTQ to be seen, and they just don't know where to start. So how did you begin that journey, and where did you look for resources and help and things like that?
So the first thing that really has to happen is we have to align ourselves with disruptors and co-conspirators. Like, we can't just have allies anymore, because allies get us to the table, but they silence our voices.
So for our listeners, can you define in your words what a disruptor and what a co-conspirator is?
Yes. So
Awesome.
For me, a disruptor is somebody who, there are no other minority voices at the table, and they don't fit into a minority category, and they're disrupting the system. They're saying, you know, we need to start looking outside of this space. We need to start trying to find other voices and listening to those voices. Where a co-conspirator is somebody who sits alongside you and breaks stuff up. Like, they're like, you know what? I know you have a good idea. I'm going to pull you into this conversation, and I'm going to stand here beside you. They use their social capital to exalt you into a space and into a supporting role.
And I feel like the difference between that and allyship is sometimes an ally says, you know, I'm with you, but sometimes there's no action, especially when we're trying to move forward in educational technology and also education leadership. So I love how you just broke that down, because it shows that action is needed if we want to move forward in this space.
Yes. And a lot of times what happens is people have the greatest intentions of bringing voice to the table. But when the voice gets to the table, if it does not agree with the other voices there, it's shut down. And it's like, so you didn't actually want a voice at the table. You wanted to be able to say you had somebody. I always tell people, when you're thinking about bringing minority voice to the table, it's not your best Black friend. Like, you can't say, oh, I have a Black friend, or we had a Black person on this committee, so we have the Black voice. Because every Black person is not the same, and every person comes to the table with different lived experiences and different perspectives, and you want an other voice. You don't want somebody who's just going to agree with the idea. And then the other part that I think is really important is that as minorities get to the table, they reach behind them and bring other minorities with them. If you are the only minority at the table, you're not doing what we're supposed to do and reaching back and saying, come with me, because we lift as we climb. That's how you make it. You reach back and you support. And if you're wanting to be the only voice there, which a lot of times it's a very scary thing when you become the second or third voice in a space, because you have this feeling of, am I supposed to agree with the other minorities here? Am I supposed to give a different opinion? Like, how do I navigate this space? Because a lot of times we have, you know, it's like a teacher's pet, like, oh, you know, this is the voice that we're going to use, and this is the Black voice, or this is the LGBTQ voice, or this is the other abled voice. And it's like, well, we're all different. So just really being authentic and letting people come to the table and be their authentic selves, be in their full humanity and their full authenticity.
Mm-hmm. What have you found in your leadership role to be a good practice of celebrating these folks once they come forward? You know, because sometimes I feel like in educational leadership, it's like, okay, we've got our people and they're awesome, but what do we do to make sure that they're celebrated, that their voices are honored, and how we can continue that process?
I think it's really about honoring that person, because everybody doesn't want to be in the limelight. So I think sometimes, you know, it's that idea they push people to the front and they're like, this is the person. And you see the pictures of them everywhere. And they're like, I do not want to be the face of this. And then some people, they do want that. And I think you have to truly know who people are. Like, I don't want to be an edgy celebrity, right? Like, I want to be an authentic voice in this community saying this is where we move to and this is where we go. And so I know other people who are like, I want the full on edgy celebrity thing. I want to be on, you know, the front of the banner. I want to be in the forefront. And you just have to figure out what they want. Don't give them cookies, because nobody wants to get fat. Like, don't be inauthentic with stuff. Just like truly honor them. If they want, when you're in meetings and it's not your idea and it's their idea, uplift them. Say, this was their idea and I'm going to allow them the space to talk about it. This was the way that they wanted to do this. And I don't know if that's me, if I'm moving too much.
Oh, no, you're good. And we can edit that out, so you're good.
All right. Really and truly just allowing people to, letting them own their work and letting them own their voice, instead of trying to be like, okay, people may not accept that you said this, so I'm going to take it. Be like, no, I'm going to stand here beside you. And when you're explaining it, I'm going to be like, yep, that's what it is. They need to do it. It's their idea. This is where we're going.
What are some strategies that you use to own your voice? Your role?
People laugh at me, and I think it's extremely funny, because I will tell everybody I'm a Black feminist. Like, in every bio I put in, I'm like, I am a Black feminist. And they're like, you don't have to say that. And I'm like, I do, because I want you to understand that this is who I am. So when I come to the table, I'm coming from the perspective and the lived experience of a Black woman in leadership who has had to deal with all of these things. And I'm coming from the place of, you know, until we do right by a large group of people, we're going to always suffer. And that group of people, depending on what we're talking about, is different at times. And so I'm going to show up like, I don't care if it hurts your feelings. Like, this is who I am. I've coming to this point in my life, I have had cancer scares. I have had, you know, I've been divorced twice. Like, I mean, my life is such that, you know, I don't have time to be inauthentic anymore. And it is what it is. You take it or you leave it. You can like it, love it, or I don't know, like Tabitha Brown says, you know, what other people think of me is none of my business. And I have really taken that in. Like, if you don't like me, I'm like, I never need to know. So yeah. That's the best strategy. And it is hard, because as minority people, like whatever minority you identify as, you're always taught to kind of be seen and not heard, because that's the way to make it. But it's like, I'm going to be seen. Like, I didn't come here to just be a part of the circle. I came here to actually influence the circle. So I think that's the best strategy. Does it get you in trouble? Yeah, it does. It'll get you kicked out of some spaces that probably weren't for you anyway, but you'll find your resting place at some point. And I know that that's really hard in the world that we live in, because you're like, I don't want to not be accepted, but sometimes being accepted means that you have to let go of a part of yourself.
Right. So before we close out, the last question I have for you before we figure out where people can find you and how they can connect with you is, for your leadership trajectory and for you advocating in all of these different spaces, especially with the school year closing out and the next school year coming up, what are you working on personally, and just kind of how does your work play into all of that?
So really and truly what I'm working on now professionally is a lot of what we do around EdTech coaches is technology. It's break fix, and it's not actual coaching. So my goal for the next school year professionally is to really help people understand that an EdTech coach is good pedagogy support. It is a person who can navigate not just reading or math or science or advanced academics or special ed or L. They can do all of that because they are focused on their curriculum agnostic. Like they love all things. So that's what I'm doing professionally. Personally, I decided that I was finally going to start to publish my dissertation. And so
very nice.
Thank you. The very first thing I did with it was I started a podcast this year called Hold My Hills, The Power of Unapologetic Living. And it's basically me talking through many of the points of my dissertation. My dissertation was about the Black woman's experience in K-12 leadership and systemic racism. So through my podcast, I break down a lot of the stereotypes and different things. So that's what I'm doing personally. And professionally, I feel like it combines, because when we see something as just one thing, we don't use it to its full capacity. And I feel like that kind of is really where I am in this world right now, is how are we looking at things in a multifaceted view?
Mm-hmm. Nice. I love that. I love everything about that. So speaking of loving it, as we close out, unfortunately, I would love to spend way more time with you. And we should do this again. We should have you on the podcast again.
We should do it again.
Yes, we should do round 2 with Dr. Jackson. But where can people find you? You do have your Twitter handle up on the screen right now. But for our listeners, people who might not have the video access, how can people get in touch with you and how can they connect with you?
So it's very easy. You can go to my website, amyeljackson.com, and you can find all of my things there, including my CV, because I am actually transitioning out of my role. And so if you're looking for somebody who is super hip and cool, I can point you in the right direction. But if you're looking for somebody who is extremely excited about EdTech and loves children and educators and wants to do right by them, I'm your girl.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Jackson. We really appreciate it. And we'll see you next time.
All right. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks for joining us today. Don't forget to like and subscribe so that you can be notified whenever we post new content. Looking forward to seeing you next time.